Evan Carter had never been so far from home. The stars outside the shuttle window glimmered like scattered jewels on black velvet, but he hardly noticed them. His mind was focused on the city below, a sprawling alien metropolis that stretched for miles, built with structures that defied human architecture. Towers curved and twisted like living organisms, and bridges hung in midair as if gravity were optional. He had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for the reality. He was here on a visit, an exchange program for engineers. His best friend, Krelth, a member of the Clithian species, had insisted he stay in his family home for the first few weeks to acclimate. Krelth had explained that Clithians valued personal connection and trust, and that staying with family was both an honor and a test. Evan had agreed, curious and eager, even though he sensed an unspoken warning in Krelth's usually calm voice. When Evan stepped through the doorway into the home, he was struck by the sheer elegance of it. The walls glowed softly, shifting colors according to some internal rhythm, casting dancing shadows on the floor. The furniture was smooth and organic, carved from living materials that seemed to breathe. And then there was the air. It hummed faintly, not unpleasantly, like an electric heartbeat. Krelth greeted him warmly, though in a way that seemed carefully measured. "Welcome, Evan," he said. His tone was calm, but there was an edge of formality that Evan didn't understand. "You will find our home different from your expectations." Krelth's tone had shifted ever so slightly, a subtle warning hidden beneath courtesy. "Your sister?" he asked, curious. "Yes," Krelth said. "She is unlike anyone you have met." It was a simple room, at least by Clithian standards, with soft lighting and a few smooth surfaces. There were no locks or chains visible, but the door hummed faintly, as if aware of who was inside. Krelth stepped out, leaving Evan alone. "Valera will meet you soon," he said over his shoulder. "Be patient." He examined the walls, the floor, the subtle patterns etched into the surfaces. Everything seemed alive, responsive, but not threatening. He felt a sense of curiosity, but also unease. Then the door sealed shut behind him. There was a soft click and a hum that rose in pitch. Evan spun around. The door had no visible handle, no key. It was as if the room itself had decided to trap him. Panic flickered briefly, but he pushed it aside. He was a trained engineer. He had seen worse situations in simulation labs. He tried the door, pressing his hands against the smooth surface. Nothing. He tested the edges, the frame, the walls themselves. The room remained silent except for the low hum, which now felt almost like a heartbeat. And then he saw her. Valera stepped into the room with slow, deliberate steps. She was tall, taller than any Clithian he had seen, with a presence that made the air feel heavier. Her skin shimmered faintly, changing color like the room lights, but more subtle, more natural. Her eyes, large and reflective, studied him carefully. There was no warmth in her gaze, only focus, but it was intense, demanding attention. "You are Evan Carter," she said, her voice smooth and controlled, but carrying a weight that made him sit up straight. "You are my brother's friend." They act where others hesitate. They make choices when others calculate endlessly. That is rare. "You are mine now. You are not my possession in the sense your species might imagine. You are mine in the sense that you are under my observation, my guidance, and my testing. You are chosen to prove something. That your species can change outcomes." He had heard stories of Clithian society, of their reliance on logic and order. Perhaps humans, in all their chaos, were exactly what they needed. "You could have asked me," he said finally. "You didn't have to lock me in a room. This is for the greater good. It is not merely a space, it is a system. It observes, it reacts, it challenges. Every choice you make is measured, every hesitation noted. Fail and consequences extend beyond yourself." "This is the beginning," she said. "Learn it, adapt, show me why humans are valuable." Evan struggled, hesitated, retried. Valera observed silently, rarely speaking, but when she did, it was to correct, to guide, or to challenge. The room changed around him, adjusting difficulty, creating scenarios he could barely comprehend. And yet he adapted. Human adaptability was messy, inefficient by alien standards, but it worked. By the time the lights shifted to indicate the approaching end of the first phase, Evan was exhausted. His mind buzzed, his muscles ached, but he had learned something crucial. The room could be understood, manipulated, even challenged. Valera's presence remained constant, looming, and intense. "You endure," she said. "You think differently. That is promising. If you can survive, you may help more than just yourself." Krelth's voice called from outside, calm and measured. "Valera says the next phase will begin soon. Are you ready, Evan? And humans, he knew, had a way of turning even confinement into opportunity. The room hummed around him, alive and alert, and Valera's presence lingered like a shadow he could not escape. Yet, for the first time, he understood one truth. Humans were not just participants in the universe. They were unpredictable forces, and sometimes that unpredictability was the greatest weapon of all. Evan smiled faintly. The challenge had begun, and he intended to survive it not as a captive, but as a human who refused to be controlled. The stars outside the window sparkled like jewels. Inside the room, a new game had begun. Evan had survived the first phase, but the relief was brief. The room behind him had shifted, walls glimmering with new patterns that seemed almost alive. Valera's presence lingered like a shadow, watching, waiting, measuring. He knew instinctively that the next phase would not be easier. Krelth, standing at the threshold of the room, spoke softly. Valera believes humans can think in ways we cannot. That is why she chose you, Evan. But this is not a game. You must understand that. I understand, I think. Proof that humans can act when logic fails, that your kind can navigate uncertainty without harming yourself or others unnecessarily. Your species has a reputation for unpredictability. That is why you are valuable. You would not have come otherwise. Observation requires isolation. Choice must be free yet contained. You are not here by chance, Evan Carter. You are here because I believe your decisions may matter. Your world may be small, but it exists in a universe where the choices of one species can ripple outward, changing the fate of many. We face a problem. Your kind may hold the solution. But the structures we depend on, logic, protocol, the strict rules of our civilization, are breaking down. Calculations fail. Predictions collapse. We need an external variable. We need a human perspective. That is why you are here. Here in this alien room with this alien watching him, he realized choice was his only weapon. He would not be a pawn. He would not be simply used. The next stage will begin. Your goal is simple. Resolve the crisis with minimal loss of life and collateral damage. The solution is not always obvious. In fact, it is rarely what our logic suggests. His mind raced. He needed to find a solution, but the tools at his disposal were limited, unfamiliar, alien. He remembered the first test. The room had taught him to experiment, to touch, to observe, to adapt. He focused on the display, tapping his fingers on the holographic interface. Lines of code, energy flow diagrams, and structural schematics appeared. He studied them, comparing patterns, predicting consequences. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time seemed distorted in the room. Evan tested multiple approaches, some failing, some partially succeeding. Valera watched silently, noting every hesitation, every decision, every instinctive leap. Finally, he discovered a solution. It was imperfect by Clithian standards, messy and inefficient, but it worked. The energy core was stabilized, the city saved, and the simulated inhabitants survived. Valera's eyes glimmered with faint approval. Interesting, she said. Your approach defies our logic, yet it succeeds. That is unexpected. That's all you wanted to see. That is why you are chosen. Valera moved closer. You have performed well, Evan Carter. You have survived the first real test. If you succeed, you will see the difference humans can make, and why your choices are important to more than just yourself. You may find yourself in situations where failure is not simulated, where consequences are real. Are you prepared for that? Courage in the face of uncertainty. Multiple crises appeared simultaneously, a structural collapse in one city, an energy overload in another, and a political conflict threatening to escalate into violence. Evan felt the weight of it immediately. This is your next test, Valera said. You will not be given guidance. You will not be given time. You must prioritize, decide, act. Every decision will be measured, every hesitation noted. Remember, human ingenuity is valued not for perfection, but for adaptability. He approached the interface and began to work, moving between simulations, making decisions, and improvising solutions. He relied on intuition, on judgment shaped by experience and empathy. He saved what he could, mitigated damage where possible, and sometimes failed. But each failure taught him something new. Hours, or perhaps only minutes, passed. Evan felt his mind stretch, adapt, and grow in ways he had never imagined. The room hummed around him, alive and responsive, reflecting his choices and adjusting scenarios in real time. Valera watched silently, her expression unreadable but her eyes glimmering with interest. At the end of the test, the scenarios stabilized. Evan stepped back, exhausted but exhilarated. He had made choices that defied Clithian logic, yet the outcomes were positive, even beneficial. He had acted with humanity, imperfect, unpredictable, yet effective. Valera approached, her presence commanding yet measured. "You have performed well, Evan Carter. You demonstrate that humans are not merely tools. You are capable of thought, of judgment, of action beyond calculation." That is rare. He was not merely a guest, a visitor, or a test subject. He was a representative of humanity's ability to adapt, to choose, to survive. And in this alien world, that made him important. For the first time, he saw Valera not as a captor, but as an evaluator, a mentor, a measure of what his species could achieve. And he resolved that he would not fail, not because he had to, but because humans did not give up. Humans adapted, survived, and changed the world around them. The door chimed softly, signaling the end of the session. Valera's presence receded slightly, but her eyes remained on him, measuring, calculating, considering. "You have learned much today," she said. "Rest. The next phase will be more challenging. You will be tested in ways your species has never faced, and you will be given choices that matter, not to simulations, but to reality. For letting me show what humans can do." The stars outside continued to glitter, indifferent to the struggles inside the alien home. But inside, a human mind had begun to shine, bright, unpredictable, unstoppable. And that, more than anything, was the reason he had been chosen. Evan's mind was still racing from the previous test. His body ached from hours of focus, but sleep was impossible. The room hummed faintly, its light adjusting to his presence. Valera had not left. She observed silently from a corner, her posture calm yet commanding. Her eyes followed every movement he made, noting every breath, every glance, every hesitation. "You are awake," she said, her voice smooth, controlled. "Good, there is no time for rest." "The next phase begins immediately," Valera said. "You have proven your ability to act differently, to adapt. Now we test your capacity to influence multiple outcomes simultaneously. You will not be working with simulations alone. You will have variables you cannot control and consequences that extend beyond this room. You may find that your decisions impact lives, resources, and political structures. That is intentional. You are human. You think differently. That difference is crucial." Valera gestured to the far wall. The surface shimmered, displaying a holographic interface that stretched across half the room. Dozens of scenarios appeared at once: city collapses, energy surges, transportation failures, and conflicts between Clithian factions. Evan's pulse quickened as he surveyed the complex display. "You will prioritize," Valera said. "You will act. You will make choices when the correct solution is unclear. Every decision is measured, every hesitation recorded. Humans thrive in chaos. Show me why." He scanned the interface, noting options that were logical, safe, and efficient. Yet none promised total success. Each solution carried risks. He felt the familiar spark of human instinct. He began to improvise, adjusting energy flows manually, rerouting power to critical systems, and prioritizing human life over structural perfection. The energy core stabilized, but not without consequences. Minor damage occurred elsewhere. It was imperfect, but it worked. Valera's eyes glimmered faintly. "Interesting, you sacrifice efficiency for survival. That is human nature. That is valuable." He quickly assessed the situation, noticing subtle cues in their communication patterns. Logic alone suggested a calculated compromise, but instinct told him otherwise. He intervened indirectly, introducing variables that encouraged dialogue, empathy, and cooperation. The factions hesitated, then agreed to a temporary truce. Valera's head tilted slightly, a gesture Evan had begun to interpret as approval. "You act in ways our logic does not predict, yet your actions succeed. That is why humans are necessary." He had never encountered technology like this, but he understood the principles. He calculated trajectories, manually adjusted controls, and used improvisation to divert trains safely. Lives were saved. Systems were damaged, but they could be repaired. Valera observed silently. "You improvise, you adapt, you prioritize life over perfection. That is rare in our calculations. That is why you are chosen." Human ingenuity, messy and imperfect, carried him through. Finally, he faced the most challenging scenario. A city-wide energy collapse threatened to trigger multiple chain reactions, potentially destroying entire districts. Emergency response units were offline, transportation grids failing, and communication systems compromised. Logic suggested evacuation, but the population was too large, too dispersed, and too panicked. Every calculated move risked further disaster. Evan paused, taking a deep breath. He had learned from previous tests, hesitation was costly. Observation and experimentation were key. He analyzed the energy flows, traffic patterns, and citizen behavior. Then he acted, combining improvisation with careful calculation. He rerouted energy, synchronized emergency systems, and guided the population using indirect influence through communication grids. Slowly, the crisis stabilized. Minor damage occurred, but the city survived. Valera stepped forward, her eyes focused on him. "You have done well," she said. "Your actions were unpredictable yet effective. That is human nature, messy, imperfect, yet powerful. That is why your species is valuable. Your species' unpredictability, your willingness to act when others hesitate, your ability to prioritize life over perfection, these are qualities we lack. And that is why you are here. That is why you are chosen." His choices mattered not because they were perfect, but because they were human. "You are impressive," Valera said, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Few humans would act as you have. Few would survive the pressure, the uncertainty, the consequences. You have earned recognition." "That's good." He had not only survived the tests, he had changed the results, altered the course of events, and influenced systems that were designed to operate without deviation. He had acted as a human, imperfect, unpredictable, and effective. The room pulsed softly, the walls shimmering as if alive, reflecting the outcomes of his choices. Valera stepped back, her posture relaxed but still commanding. "Rest now," she said. "The next phase will challenge not only your mind, but your ability to navigate social dynamics, politics, and alliances. You will face dilemmas where no choice is perfect, and every action has consequences beyond your control." He had survived the most complex phase yet, and he had proven that human ingenuity, empathy, and adaptability were powerful tools, even in a world governed by logic and control. "And what if I fail?" he asked quietly. Valera's eyes softened just slightly. "Failure is not permanent. Observation and adaptation are continuous. You will learn, you will adjust, and you will act again. That is the essence of your species. That is why humans are necessary." He looked at Valera, understanding her fully for the first time. She was not cruel nor capricious. She was a guardian of her people, a strategist, and a measure of potential. And she had chosen him, not because he was strong or intelligent or skilled, but because he was human. A new understanding settled over him. Humans were not predictable, not controlled, not bound by the same constraints as the Clithians. They could improvise, adapt, and act where others hesitated. That unpredictability was not a weakness, it was a strength. Evan straightened, feeling a surge of determination. He would not be a pawn, he would not be a captive of circumstance. He would act, adapt, and influence outcomes as a human, unpredictable, ingenious, and unstoppable. The room chimed softly, signaling the end of the session. Valera's presence receded, but her eyes remained on him, watching, measuring, calculating. Evan knew instinctively that the next phase would be even more complex, with consequences extending beyond simulations into reality. Yet he felt ready. He had survived isolation, chaos, and uncertainty. He had proven adaptability and ingenuity. He had demonstrated the human ability to act when logic failed, to prioritize life over perfection, to make choices that mattered. And that, he realized, was why he had been chosen. Evan sat quietly for a moment, letting the lessons sink in. He was tired, yes, but he was alive, and he was prepared. Humanity had a way of surviving, of adapting, of turning even the most impossible situations into opportunity. And he would do just that. Outside, the stars continued to glitter, indifferent to the struggles within the alien home. But inside, a human mind had begun to shine, a mind capable of changing outcomes, influencing systems, and defying expectations. Valera's words echoed in his mind. "Your species demonstrates qualities that are vital. You are chosen." And he was ready to meet it, not as a captive, not as a tool, but as a human who refused to surrender choice, who thrived in uncertainty, and who could turn even the impossible into success. Evan woke to a faint hum vibrating through the room. The light had shifted to a soft gold, signaling the start of a new phase. He rubbed his eyes, feeling the ache of exhaustion from the previous tests, but there was no time to dwell on fatigue. Valera stood across the room, her expression calm as always, but her eyes glimmered with focus. "Good, you are awake," she said. "The next phase begins now. This time your actions will affect more than simulations. You will interact with others, beings of my world who do not understand your kind. You must navigate social dynamics, alliances, and unexpected consequences. Human adaptability will be tested in a way no simulation could capture. Here, the variables were real, the consequences tangible, and the people unpredictable. Valera gestured to the walls. A series of holographic displays appeared, showing multiple cities, political factions, and conflict zones. In each scenario, citizens were panicked, resources were strained, and tensions were rising. Evan recognized immediately that this was no longer purely a test of logic. It was a test of judgment, empathy, and moral decision-making. You will need to cooperate, Valera explained. You will encounter individuals who distrust you, who may act against your intentions. Observe, understand, and influence. Your species' ability to adapt to uncertainty is your greatest strength. He had learned that hesitation could be costly. He had learned to trust instinct, improvise, and adapt. Now he needed to apply that skill to social and political challenges. The first scenario involved a city where energy grids had failed, causing widespread panic. Citizens crowded the streets, and rival factions were arguing over control of the remaining resources. Automated emergency systems were offline, and the human touch, the ability to improvise, to communicate, to influence, was absent. Evan studied the holographic interface carefully. He saw patterns in citizen behavior and faction interactions. He noticed how some leaders reacted with fear, while others reacted with anger. Logic alone would suggest assigning resources according to calculated priorities, but human instinct told him that social dynamics mattered as much as efficiency. He began by communicating directly with faction leaders, using cultural cues he had observed in prior simulations. He emphasized collaboration over competition, empathy over authority, and patience over reaction. Slowly, factions began to cooperate, redistributing resources, calming panic, and restoring order. Valera watched silently, her eyes tracking every decision. She did not interfere, but her presence felt like a constant measurement of his choices. The next scenario was more challenging. A neighboring city was experiencing a flood, and evacuation routes were blocked. Citizens were frightened, some resisting assistance. Evan had no direct control over the infrastructure, and the automated systems remained offline. He had to rely on communication, improvisation, and leadership. He coordinated groups of citizens to act together, guiding them to safe routes. He used simple signals and reasoning to encourage cooperation. Some attempts failed, requiring rapid adjustment. Panic spread, but Evan adapted, reorganizing groups, redirecting traffic, and calming fear. Lives were saved, and the flood's impact was minimized. Valera's voice broke the silence. You are effective. You influence not through authority alone, but through understanding and empathy. That is human nature. That is why your species is valued. Resources were scarce, communication was limited, and leaders were stubborn. Logic would suggest strict negotiation protocols, but Evan realized that human flexibility could achieve more than rigid procedure. He intervened by creating indirect influence. He introduced new information, showing how cooperation could benefit both sides. He suggested joint projects that required collaboration, offering incentives that appealed to both logic and emotion. Slowly, tension decreased. Leaders began to communicate, citizens followed, and conflict was averted. Valera's eyes glimmered faintly, a signal Evan had learned to read: approval. Human improvisation, empathy, and negotiation, traits alien simulations struggled to account for, were making a difference. The final scenario was the most complex. Multiple crises occurred simultaneously: a citywide power failure, a flood, and rising political tensions. Automated systems were offline. Panic was spreading. Leaders were paralyzed. Citizens acted unpredictably, some resisting assistance, others exploiting chaos. Evan felt the familiar rush of pressure, but also the spark of human ingenuity. He prioritized actions based on risk and impact, coordinating efforts across multiple locations. He communicated directly with key leaders, influencing their decisions, while also improvising solutions to immediate technical problems. The room pulsed around him, shifting to reflect his influence. Holographic citizens moved with his guidance, factions responded to his interventions, and disasters were mitigated through a combination of logic, intuition, and empathy. The complexity was overwhelming, yet he adapted, thinking, reacting, improvising. Hours, or perhaps only minutes, passed. Evan's body ached, his mind was exhausted, but slowly the crises stabilized. The city survived. Citizens were safe. Leaders had begun to collaborate. The simulations ended not with perfection, but with survival, adaptation, and cooperation, qualities that were distinctly human. Valera approached him, her presence calm but intense. "You have exceeded expectations," she said. "You navigate uncertainty with a combination of reasoning, instinct, and empathy. You influence not only systems, but beings. That is human nature. That is why your species is vital. Your species' ability to adapt, to improvise, and to influence outcomes in unpredictable circumstances is rare. That is why you are here. That is why you are chosen." He was representing humanity's unique ability to adapt, to improvise, and to make decisions when others could not. "You've learned much today," Valera continued. "But understanding human influence is only part of the challenge. The next phase will test your capacity to navigate interspecies relationships and political complexities beyond simulations. You will encounter individuals who do not trust you, who may act against your intentions. You must adapt, influence, and survive without direct control." He had survived isolation, chaos, and uncertainty. Now he would survive social and political complexity. Valera's presence remained close, her eyes glimmering with a mix of calculation and curiosity. "You have performed well, Evan Carter. You have shown that human choice matters, that your species can influence outcomes where others cannot. That is why you are valuable. You will need all of these in the next phase, for the challenges ahead will be greater and the consequences more tangible. You are not only surviving, you are shaping outcomes. That is why your species is essential." He was a human, chosen to demonstrate the unique qualities of his species in a world that valued predictability and logic above all else. Outside, the stars continued to glitter, indifferent to the struggles within the alien home. Inside, a human mind had begun to shine, a mind capable of influencing systems, navigating complexity, and acting where others could not. Valera's words echoed in his mind. "Your species demonstrates qualities that are vital. You are chosen." And for the first time, Evan Carter felt not fear, but anticipation. Evan Carter had survived tests that pushed his mind and spirit to the limit. He had faced simulations of disaster, navigated crises with no clear solutions, and influenced the behavior of beings whose logic was alien to him. Yet, he knew the final challenge would be the greatest. Valera entered the room without warning, her presence as commanding as ever. The room shimmered and pulsed, the lights reflecting the weight of the moment. "This is the final phase, Evan Carter," she said. "Everything you have learned will be tested. The scenarios are real and the consequences are no longer simulated. Your actions will impact lives directly, and your decisions may determine the future of my people. That imperfection is your strength. Your species can adapt, improvise, and survive when others cannot. That is why you are here. That is why you are chosen." Energy grids were failing, transportation systems were collapsing, and political tensions threatened to erupt into open conflict. It was chaos, but it was real, and Evan could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. Valera's voice was calm but firm. "You will act as a mediator, a problem solver, and a decision-maker. You have no direct control over all variables. Some choices will have unintended consequences. That is expected. Adapt, observe, and act. The future of thousands depends on your human judgment." The first crisis involved a massive power surge threatening a city district. Automated systems had failed and panic was spreading. He analyzed the energy grid, noting patterns and weak points. Then he acted, improvising a series of manual reroutes, stabilizing the system. Minor damage occurred, but the city remained intact. Lives were saved. Valera's eyes followed every movement. Efficient yet adaptive, you prioritize life over perfection. That is human nature. That is why your species is vital. He encouraged dialogue, highlighted mutual interests, and proposed solutions that appealed to both reason and emotion. Slowly, the tension eased. Cooperation emerged where resistance had reigned. Valera's lips curved slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of his success. "Your influence extends beyond systems to beings themselves. That is human ingenuity, messy, imperfect, yet effective." Evan felt the familiar rush of pressure, but also clarity. He prioritized life, coordinated efforts, and made real-time decisions. He combined reasoning, intuition, and empathy. He improvised when technology failed, guided citizens when leaders hesitated, and resolved conflicts that logic alone could not fix. Hours passed, but Evan worked tirelessly. He moved between crises, adapting to each challenge, influencing systems and beings alike. He made mistakes, but each mistake taught him how to adjust, to recover, and to continue. Human resilience was at work, imperfect, relentless, unstoppable. When the crises finally stabilized, the room fell silent. Evan's body ached, his mind was exhausted, yet a profound sense of accomplishment filled him. He had done more than survive. He had influenced outcomes, saved lives, and proven that human adaptability and ingenuity were forces to be reckoned with, even in an alien world. Valera stepped closer, her expression calm but intense. You have done what few could. You have faced uncertainty, chaos, and consequence, and yet you have acted decisively. You have influenced systems, guided beings, and mitigated disaster. That is human nature. That is why you are chosen. That is why your species matters. That is why you are valued. Not as a captive, not as a tool, but as a human. Your decisions, your choices, and your actions have consequences. You have shown us that humanity can be a force for survival, collaboration, and ingenuity. That is why you are respected. Humans are no longer observers in this world. You are partners, capable of influencing outcomes where others cannot. That is a rare and valuable quality. You have made choices that saved lives, prevented chaos, and guided civilizations. That is why you are essential. Krelth entered the room quietly. Valera has spoken highly of you, he said. You have done more than survive, you have influenced our society. Your actions will be remembered. Evan Carter, you are free to leave this room. But remember, freedom is not merely the absence of confinement. It is the ability to act, to choose, and to influence. That is the true test of your species, and you have passed. Yet he had survived, not through brute strength, not through superior logic, but through humanity, the ability to adapt, to empathize, and to act decisively in uncertainty. He stepped toward the door, which opened silently at his approach. Beyond it, the alien city stretched out, alive with activity, unaware of the role he had played in preventing disasters and guiding civilizations. Before leaving, he turned to Valera. Thank you, he said simply, for letting me show what humans can do. He had faced impossible challenges, survived chaos, and proven that human adaptability, ingenuity, and empathy could influence outcomes even in an alien world. As he stepped out of the room, the weight of responsibility lifted, replaced by a profound sense of possibility. Humanity was not powerless. Humanity was not predictable. Humanity was capable of shaping outcomes, navigating uncertainty, and surviving challenges that no other species could. And in this alien world, that mattered more than anything. Outside, the stars sparkled, indifferent yet magnificent. Evan walked forward with a newfound confidence, understanding that humans, though small in the grand universe, possessed qualities that could change the course of civilizations. Valera's final words echoed in his mind. You are chosen. You are valued. You are essential. He had survived tests, navigated crises, and influenced a world far beyond his own. He had proven that humanity's strength was not in technology or sheer force, but in choice, ingenuity, and the courage to act when others hesitated. The challenges of the alien world would continue, as they always would. But Evan knew one undeniable fact. Humans were not simply part of the universe. They were a force within it, capable of influencing outcomes, shaping destinies, and surviving where others might fail. And that, more than anything, was why he had been chosen. For the first time since arriving on this world, Evan Carter felt a sense of belonging, not because he had been tested, but because he had proven what it meant to be human. And in that moment, he knew the universe had room for humans, and for their unpredictable, unstoppable ingenuity.